Good evening and welcome. I'm Teresa Patterson, the very proud principal of Palm Harbor University High School. And on behalf of our school committee, we're honored to host this Listen and Learn community event. Tonight, we'd like to welcome Superintendent Kevin Hendrick and School Board Chair Laura Hines, our school board members Katie Blacksberg and Lisa Kane. I'm honored to introduce our moderator, Ms. Mistine Daw, who's Pinellas County Schools Director of Strategic Partnerships and Community Relations. Let's please welcome our panel. Thank you for being here. On a side note, we do have 2 other events on campus, so if this is not the event that you intended to attend, I can help you with locations of what else is going on our busy facility use calendar. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're all good. Thank you to Palm Harbor University and Principal Miss Teresa Patterson for hosting us tonight. Welcome everyone to this Community Connection Listen and Learn session with a focus on athletics. I am Mistine Daw, Pinellas County's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and I will be your host and moderator this evening. The purpose of the Listen and Learn series is to provide the opportunity for stakeholders of Pinellas County Schools to engage with the school board, superintendent, and district leadership to promote continuous improvement for our students, family, staff, and community. Over the last 3 years, the board and superintendent committed to continuing the Listen and Learn sessions as they represent their promise to be visible in the community as we continue to strengthen partnerships with both as a district and within our school communities. This school year, the sessions have specific areas of focus so that the superintendent and board hear directly from stakeholders regarding areas of interest. PCS Community Listen and Learn sessions are open to all stakeholders, students, families, staff, partners, and community members. To start things off, I want to give our school board and superintendent the opportunity to introduce themselves and welcome our stakeholders. School Board Chair, Ms. Hine, would you like to start the introductions?
Good evening. My name is Laura Hine. I was first elected to the school board in 2020 and then subsequently last year. I have two children in our schools, a 6th grader and a 9th grader, but my strong interest in our schools started 10 years ago when my 14-year-old was just 4 years old, and I looked around and thought, our schools have to be excellent for everybody. They can, and they must be excellent for every single child, regardless of which school you go to, and that's what I've been spending 10 years working on, so I'm excited to hear any of your questions and ideas tonight.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lisa Kane. I am a member of the Pinellas County School Board. I was first elected in 2018 and re-elected again in 2022. I've been serving on the board. This will be my 8th year. I currently have 4 children in Pinellas County Schools, ranging from 5th grade all the way through senior in high school, and actually 2 that attend Palm Harbor U. So excited to be here. As I usually are. And I've been a huge proponent on the Pinellas County School Board for arts education. I am an arts educator in our community, teaching musical theater and music to students across our district for over 17 years. So it is a big part of my platform on the school board, and I've been happy to fight hard to make sure that our arts remain a central part of our education in Pinellas. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katie Blacksberg. I am the newest member to the Pinellas County School Board. I was elected in November of last year. So I'm excited to be a part of these Listen and Learn sessions and hear part of, community stakeholders and your questions. I have 3 children. 2 of them are student athletes. I have 1 aspiring athlete. She's only 8. And I was a student athlete, so I'm happy to be here and answer any questions.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Hendrick, Pinellas County Schools Superintendent. It's my pleasure to be here tonight with you and share more about athletics and other things in the district. This is my 4th year as superintendent in Pinellas County Schools, and as it relates to our topic tonight of athletics, I was a longtime high school coach, athletic coordinator, and then principal in our district. I coached high school basketball for 8 years, track for 3 years. I was an athletic coordinator for a short while and then served as a high school principal for 9 years. So there's not a track, gym, or field I haven't been on in our district, and I look forward to hearing your questions and suggestions this evening.
Thank you. I do want to do a quick review of the agenda tonight before we get started. Superintendent Hendrick will do an overview for 25 minutes. Next, we will conduct the question and answer with the superintendent and board members for 45 minutes. As you came in this evening, you received an index card to write your questions on. If you need an additional index card or have written your questions already, just raise your hand and a staff member will be by to collect or provide you with another card. Following the Q&A, there will also be an opportunity for all stakeholders to provide feedback regarding athletics and PCS for 15 minutes. Everyone will have the opportunity to participate by posting comments to the questions around the room. During this time, the superintendent and board members will also be present and will continue to speak to stakeholders. Superintendent Hendrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dahl. You've met three of our school board members tonight. Just a brief overview of our school district and a few statistics and highlights about our schools, and then we'll dive into the athletics topic. But we have three of our 7 board members here tonight. Our Listen and Learns are designed to have 3 board members. In fact, for this one, I think we had multiple volunteers for the athletics one, but the 3 in front of you are the winners for tonight's Listen and Learn, and we're grateful to have them here, but you can see the other members of our 7-member elected school board. Our vision in Pinellas County Schools is 100% student success with a mission of preparing each student for college, career, and life. And we operate under a set of core values that you can see there, and we expect to see in classrooms and certainly on athletic fields and courts. Our district strategic plan is something that our board has adopted on a 3-year cycle. This is the final year in a 3-year plan. You can see the 6 strategic priorities listed there, many of which are related to athletics and athletic competition. Tonight, one of the things we hope to get from you is feedback on our strategic plan. And so a little bit later when we break, we have a QR code here and I think another one over here. We'd love your input and feedback on how to improve in the next 3-year cycle, including anything related to athletics. We're certainly going to take your comments that you'll have an opportunity to give us tonight. But in the strategic plan at large, these 6 strategic priorities, we'd love your feedback, and we'll have an opportunity to do that in a little bit. As it relates to athletics and how that fits into our strategic plan, everything that students do in our schools is part of the school experience. And certainly for some students, the athletic experience is something that motivates them beyond repair. And so that motivates them in athletics. It certainly demonstrates safe and respectful climate and culture. We do really work with equity, with providing opportunities to every school and every student in our district. And you can see the other areas, including fiscal responsibility. As we talk about athletics, we'll hit on some of those items tonight. Just an overview of the school district before we hit athletics. And first, we're proud to continue to improve our ranking in the state in terms of overall performance by students on district grade and school grades. You can see the top 13 school districts in the state. There are 67 school districts in the state of Florida, 1 in each county. Nassau County is the farthest right, northeast county in the state. St. John's is up there as well, and you can see Pinellas ranking very well. That ranking has improved over the last decade. We were in the 30s for most of the 2000s, but we've steadily improved really since the pandemic. Our students have done really well, and you can see our A-rated school district and the fact that we are our highest rank that we've ever been. And the typical tendency when that comes up is, well, it must be easier to make an A. Everybody makes an A, and the answer is that's not true. In fact, if you take a look at our neighboring districts, you can see that the majority of schools in those districts, with the exception of Sarasota, are C schools. Each of the school districts that borders us has more C's than they have anything else. In Pinellas, we have more A's than any other school grade. And so we're proud. Our student performance has resulted in our school grades, and then the district grade has continually improved. Tonight, we're not here to talk about early literacy or college and career acceleration, although we're happy to do that in the questions or afterwards. But we always want to sing the good news of student achievement of our children in our schools when we get the opportunity, and certainly tonight is one of those opportunities. 66 A grades, as I mentioned, 37 Bs, only 13 Cs, no Ds, no Fs. 89% of our schools are A and B schools. So tonight we're going to talk athletics and give a little bit of a history of Pinellas County Schools in terms of success, and then we're going to jump into some of the budget and some of the programmatic things, and then entertain questions tonight. But I do want to start with successes, and I'm going to hit a lot of our sports and state championships because they matter. The state of Florida has districts, they have regions, they have state championships, and you can see, as I'll go through the next couple of slides, a number of successful schools, and including the very one that we're sitting in here tonight. 11 state boys basketball championships. I want to mention just some of the coaches that won those state titles because many of them have gyms named after them in our district. Roy King from Hollins High School has the gym named after him. Frank Griffin at Dunedin High. Freddie Dials at Gibbs. Jack Wilson at Clearwater. Ken Robinson at Boca Ciega, and Dan Wright at Lakewood all have gyms named after him. Dan Wright won a couple of those. And more recently, Randy Schumann from Boca Ciega, and most recently, Larry Murphy in Gibbs High School. You can actually see Gibbs is the big picture there, and the top picture there. They won 2 years ago and were state runners-up last year. On the girls' side, 5 state titles, including Gibbs High School, Boca Ciega High School, Lakewood High School, including Coach Nicole Tunsil, who you see there on the bottom right, won a state championship as a player and as a coach at Lakewood, and she's still the coach at Lakewood. Baseball and softball, similarly good success. 6 baseball state championships, including Dunedin High School, Seminole High School, who in 2001 finished undefeated, won the 5A state championship, and were also crowned national champions as they were ranked #1 by Baseball America. Softball state championships, there have been just 2, both here at Palm Harbor University High School, 1999 and 2004. Tennis state championships, a lot of those, boys and girls state championships. Most recently, last year, Osceola High School boys varsity tennis team won the state championship. You can see a picture of Osceola there, including an individual state champion and a doubles state champion there as well. In soccer, 5 boys state titles, 9 girls state championships. Lots to celebrate there, including St. Petersburg High School, Lakewood High School, and Eastlake on the boys' side, Clearwater as well. And then on the girls' side, St. Pete, Seminole, Countryside, all in soccer, and also Palm Harbor, which has won an impressive 6 out of the 9 girls state championships in soccer. Swimming, lots to celebrate there as well. 10 boys state championships, 8 girls state championships. Lots of prolific Olympic swimmers, including Nicole Hazlett from Lakewood High School, Melanie Marjalis from Countryside, Scott Tucker from Seminole, Sydney Pickram from Eastlake, Bobby Fink from Countryside, who was just in the Olympics last year, Danielle Collins, and more. But here's all those Olympic athletes. You can see swimmers, tennis, soccer, track and field, windsurfing recently. Those are some of the ones that were in recent Olympics in the last, say, 2 decades, and we're proud to sing those champions. Lots of other individual state champions. We could talk all night. Football is the one area you don't see state champions, despite a very proud football history with lots of famous athletes in football. No state championships for Pinellas County in our 100-year history. We have had several teams get to the state championship, but never a state title. We are also proud for a robust middle school athletics program. You can see the fall sports, cross country and volleyball, winter sports, basketball and cheerleading, spring sports, track and field, and flag football. Those have expanded in the last couple of years. Cross country was added a few years ago, as well as flag football. And overall, across the year, over 4,300 opportunities for middle school students to participate at the various schools in all those sports. Also in middle school, one of the things that the board has emphasized a lot is improving the middle school experience, and we're doing that academically, but part of that is a co-curricular opportunity, including opportunities for intramurals. And so we have stipends for coaches or club sponsors to sponsor some of these things: indoor soccer, ball hockey, which is also in our elementary schools, pickleball, step clubs, running clubs, and soccer clubs. Indoor soccer, which was maybe the most intense championship we've had each year, is to watch the indoor soccer middle school championship. So those middle school experiences coupled with the sports are ways in which we're trying to engage middle school students in athletics. On the high school side, pretty standard in terms of fall sports, winter sports, spring sports. Lacrosse and bowling are the 2 most recent sports that have been added in the last decade, bowling the most recent. And some of the sports up there, you'll see JV as well. Many of them have JV programs. Not every school does. It depends on enrollment and interest in those sports. But over 10,000 opportunities across the district in all of the sports that you see. And of course, not every one of those is a unique student. We do have multi-sport athletes in many, many schools. So we wanted to dig into athletics by the numbers, and so often the question is, how do we account for athletics, and what does that look like? So Pinellas County Schools is a centralized athletics program, and what that means is the district, the county, pays for a set standard across the district for all programs, and I'm going to name some of the things that those things cover. So it's a certain number of games each year. So for example, in varsity football, Pinellas County Schools pays for every school to have 10 varsity football games each year. As the case is, that's the maximum number you're allowed to have, and those maximum numbers are set by the Florida High School Athletic Association. So we pay for 10 games. In basketball, for example, we might pay for 15 games when there's a maximum allowable of 25. So what that means is Central Athletics will pay for referees, ticket takers, buses, the uniforms obviously, for 15 games. And if your school wants to participate in up to 10 more, that's on the school and the individual program to do that. And you might say, well, that seems really strange. Well, basketball coaches prefer it that way. They want to schedule some of their own games, and they want to go to tournaments. So they go to holiday tournaments. Some of those may be local, and they play 3 games in a Clearwater holiday tournament. They may go over to Tampa and play 3. They may go down to Miami or other places. Some even travel out of state. But at the district level, we fund, say, 15 games. And you can apply that to every sport. So if it's soccer, if it's JV soccer versus JV football versus swimming, there's a certain number of events that the district funds, and anything above that is on the school to fund if they so choose to do that. Sometimes those are not expensive things to fund, and oftentimes they can be money makers. So a school may say, that's fine, I'm going to schedule a one-day event at my school, and I'm going to bring in 6 teams and charge them to come, and then charge for tickets and get concessions. And so I get to host that event, and I also get to take all the profits from that event. Now the school assumes that risk. If it rains and it doesn't work out and there's not as many fans or what have you, you assume the risk of that as well. But that's what the sort of centralized means. So it covers transportation, it covers officials, it covers athletic trainers, certainly the coaches' salaries, the uniforms, ticket takers, those types of things. So across our district, we spend about $5.2 million a year operating the athletics program, covering the items that you see there. So that includes $2.2 million for paying our coaches. And we're very excited that this year, these are last year's funds, that number will go way up. And that's directly as a result of the referendum. So when voters approved the referendum last November, they approved an increase in the millage for more money for teacher salaries, for the first time a supplement for support staff salaries, and the rest of the referendum covers reading, arts, and technology. You don't hear athletics anywhere in there, but where the athletics comes in is on the salary side. So in talking to our teachers union and our support staff union, and certainly the board and the unions agreed that yes, we want to take a portion of those referendum dollars and increase the salaries for coaches and club sponsors and theater directors and marching band directors, so that they get paid more for doing these events. And so I can tell you, as a former varsity basketball coach in the district, the stipend for varsity boys basketball coaches and girls, it's the same boys and girls, was $2,100 for 20 years. It was $2,100 for 20 straight years. The district did not move coaches' salaries at all. It was the same. About 5 years ago, 7, 8 years ago now, we started to bump them up a little bit. But with the referendum this year, a varsity boys basketball coach will make, if I don't mess this up, $4,700. So is it worth $4,700 to coach the season? Well, if you coached it like I did, which is the way most coaches do, it's still pennies in the hour, but it's a lot more than $2,100, right? And so we've tried to continue to increase that. Across all sports, football is typically the one that has the highest supplement. That is $6,000 for the varsity football season, another $1,500 for the spring season, so $7,500 for both. None of those are as high as we'd like them to be, but they're a lot higher than they were 6-7 years ago, and even much higher than they were last year. On average, the supplements went up somewhere between 33% and 50% for each of those areas this year. So we're really proud of that. But that's covered by the district, and there's a certain number of positions that are covered. So typically a varsity coach in every sport, and then in many coaches, an assistant coach. If there's a JV coach, that's covered as well. And in some coaches like football, there's multiple assistant coaches. In some like golf, there's no assistant coach, right? It's just the varsity coach. So we're proud to see that, but also the district pays for that. The district pays for uniforms for all schools on a rotating basis. You can see the amount of money that was allocated for that last year. The way that that works is we have a bid process with a company that wins the bid to have uniforms, or a number of companies that win a bid to have uniforms, and then schools are afforded dollars to pay for those uniforms each year. They are on a rotating basis, so typically every 3 years a varsity sport receives new uniforms. Typically every 3 years a varsity sport will receive new uniforms. In some cases, it may be 4 years or 5 years because the uniforms are still in good shape, or there were a lot of uniforms and not a lot of players, so there's still a good inventory. Or the coach says, I like these uniforms, I don't want to change them. In some cases, they're ordered every 2 years because the school did a very poor job of inventorying their uniforms and they lost some, or the coach left and they never collected the uniforms back, and now we only have 8 uniforms and we need 22. So there are varying situations there, but it's a budget that's given to schools, and then schools manage that budget. And so the school can choose to buy for the girls basketball team this year and boys next year and soccer the year after and mix all those up, but there's enough funds in general for every 3 years for a varsity team to have new uniforms. The JV ones are normally passed down. Now, if a school says we want to do more or do it more frequently or raise money for that, they can. There are some basic guidelines and things that they have to follow, but they can raise additional funds and buy them every year and things like that. There are some things that they can't do because of either state rules or local rules. They can't put their names on the back of their jerseys, or they can't have certain warm-ups. Again, trying to create an equity across the district so that it's nice and good, but not unfair from one school to the next. So those are uniforms. Athletic trainers is an expense, I'll mention in a little bit, that has continued to increase. We pay for athletic trainers to be on every high school campus. I believe it's 30 hours a week, and those 30 hours are spread out amongst the sports. And obviously the high contact sports get more hours. The lower contact sports get less hours. But any student athlete who suffers an injury, low contact, high contact, can see the trainer, can receive treatment, receive a referral, etc., as it relates to trainers. We do have 3 different groups that we contract with for trainers: Baycare, All Florida Orthopedic, and Advent Health. And then you see officials and referees. Again, the district pays for those on that basis of how many games we appropriate for the year. So if we are saying we'll pay for 13 soccer games, then that means we'll pay officials for 13 games, right? We don't hire the officials. We have a contract with an officials association. This is not a night to complain about officials, but as a longtime coach, if you want to tell me how much you don't like officials, I'll listen to it later, all right? Transportation to and from games. So you can see the budget for transportation. Obviously, school bus transportation is more cost efficient than non-school bus transportation, so that's hiring a contractor to do that. When possible, we want to use school buses. Obviously, we have to finish transporting students home from school first before we can start running athletic routes. So we have to finish our middle school routes, and then we start the athletic pickups. In some cases, we have to decide that it's just not possible to get a team to a spot on time, and so we hire an outside contractor to do that. Again, we do look to make those in-county ones, and so some of our scheduling decisions are based around making those shorter runs for students and student athletes and parents and everyone else. There are times when you're in a district with schools that are outside of our county and we just don't have control over that. When I was a high school basketball coach, I coached at Dunedin High School. The closest school in our district was Lakewood High School, and the other 4 schools were in Bradenton and Sarasota. All right, and so we had to get on a bus and drive all the way down there for district games. It wasn't anyone's fault or problem, but obviously we weren't going to take a school bus and leave at 3 o'clock. We had to take private transportation. And then general season expenses include things like field paint, security, trophies. We give schools a security budget, and then they use that budget to hire security personnel, mostly school resource officers, to work games. Again, larger crowds typically have more police at those games. Smaller crowds may have none, or maybe just one school resource officer. What this budget does not cover, and you can see it in small print at the bottom, are field repairs and maintenance, scoreboard replacements, bleacher replacements, fields, tracks, concession stands, restrooms. All of that is in a separate budget, a capital budget that is obviously in the tens of millions of dollars, but isn't in the really daily operation of how that works. And so in terms of revenue, we receive a little bit over $1 million last year in revenue. The great majority of that is ticket revenue that is sold with tickets. We do have a couple of contracts with BSN, which does a lot of the uniform purchases, and Nike, which is also another uniform vendor that we have some revenue from, but the great majority of it is ticket revenue. And you can see that covers maybe about 20% of the overall cost to run the athletics program, just from the centralized perspective. There's obviously a lot more cost that booster clubs and others help support schools with, but that's the overall cost at the district level. In comparison, just kind of looking at what that looks like versus other districts. First, on ticket costs, we did raise our ticket prices this year, as I'm sure the parents in this room know. Football went from $7 to $9, other sports from either $4 or $5 to $6, and you can see how that lines up with other districts. It's fairly comparable. We're also one of the few districts that does not charge an athletics participation fee to parents. So children who participate, student athletes who participate in our programs, do not pay any fee for athletics. They obviously need to have a physical, which is state required, and that costs money, although we can assist with that as well. And there is a mandatory insurance that is required. But in terms of paying a fee to participate, to contribute to uniforms or referees or anything like that, in our district at this time, it's not something that we do. We gave an example of Pasco County and what they charge there. Costs for athletics have really skyrocketed, like everything else, groceries and everything else in everyone's lives. But just for an example, athletic trainers just 3 years ago was about $500,000 for the district. It's now $700,000. There is a shortage of athletic trainers in the industry, and so to hire them at the different groups that we hire from, they've had to pay more money, and thus we are having to pay more money in response. Referee and officials cost in the last 3 years has increased 50% per game. We don't set those fees. The Florida High School Athletic Association does. They set a range, and then we can negotiate within that range. But as you can imagine, there's not like 10 officials organizations to negotiate with. So when you have sort of one soccer officials association, your negotiation power really isn't great when you're the one having to pay for it. So you can see those costs and what those look like. I did mention, I mentioned just briefly the cost of the general budget in terms of capital cost, and just some things to keep in mind. Our synthetic rubberized tracks we put in the last 10 years, a lot of those are going to be replaced in the next several years. That's about an $8 to $10 million cost in the capital budget. We operate 5 pools in the district at different sites. One of those, Clearwater High School, we had to close recently because it needs a lot of repairs. That's probably about a $2 to $3 million repair. A lot of people have asked about athletic fields and could we have more turf fields? The answer is we can have anything we want. It just costs us something else on the other side. So we can invest more in turf fields, but we may invest less in air conditioners or painting or other things in the capital budget. Those cost about $1.5 million a piece to put in. The reason we haven't put more in is because we wanted to see how this first wave of those goes. We have 4, I believe, or 5 across the district, and to see how they hold up. What's the maintenance on them? What's the lifespan? We know what we were told when they were put in, but I also know that, just like in your house, you're told the roof's going to last 40 years and it lasts, it's leaking in 10, and so you have to make sure that those things are working. The other part of that is a lot of athletes and coaches prefer grass if it's maintained well. There are fewer injuries on grass fields than turf fields. Certainly in soccer and football and lacrosse, that legs can be injured more frequently on a turf field versus a grass field. if the grass field is in good shape. If the grass field is not in good shape, then obviously you'd rather have a turf field. Other things like gyms are resurfaced kind of every other summer, or every 3 summers, depending on the usage. Those are about $35,000 a piece, about a couple $100,000 to replace the wood on a floor. We rescreen tennis courts and baseball outfields and things like that every couple of years. There's a cost, obviously, for that. Tennis courts, outdoor courts, and things like that sometimes teams use get done every 5 or 6 years, and obviously have a cost to those as well. So wanted to just outline what those costs were as we have those questions and conversations tonight. So we really want your feedback tonight on a number of questions that we have posted up here around, which later on you'll have a chance, if you will, to kind of use those Post-it notes that you have to write answers to these questions and post them up there. We collect them, we take them seriously, we make them part of a public record. We don't put your name on it, we just capture what was written. But some of the things we're asking you tonight, what do you believe our schools are doing well when it comes to athletics? Whether it's coaches, facilities, communication, the support of student athletes, whatever that might be. Let us know what is going well, because we like to thank the people who are doing those things and make sure people know that they're appreciated. The second question, are there sports or other extracurricular athletic programs that you wish were available at middle school and high school? And in particular, if you have an interest in that and want to be part of a startup group, please leave your name and phone number. For example, when we started lacrosse a couple of years ago, we had a dedicated group of volunteers who raised money, really got the programs launched by their fundraising, and then it was just a matter of us maintaining that. And they actually left a little bit of, about $10,000 once all the costs were done and up and running, to say, use this money to continue to build lacrosse programs across the district. So if you're somebody who wants to see a new sport or a new program, certainly leave us that, but also if you're interested in helping with that, we'd love to have that information. Third question, what improvements or changes would you suggest to overall athletics programs, whether, again, it's coaching, funding, equipment, scheduling, communication? What are ways in which we can improve, or in your experience, I assume you're here tonight because you have experience with our programs, you can share those with us. And then lastly, if you can implement or have one new initiative or change tomorrow, like right away, in Pinellas County Schools athletics, what would it be and why? Obviously, over time, certain things can happen, but what can happen right away? So we're going to leave those questions up there for you to give us feedback. You can kind of write your notes as we are going through this, and then stick those up there when we kind of break. But we're going to go to questions now from the audience. So the next thing is for you to write out questions on index cards and hold those up in the air, and our moderators will come around and collect those. And then Ms. Dahl will take those and read those to the board and myself, and we'll do our very best to answer. And if we don't know the answer, I do want to introduce a couple of individuals that are here. We have an athletics department at the district office of really kind of, I don't know, well, it's 3 people, but it's not any of their full-time jobs. So Mr. Mark Allison is our director of athletics, driver's ed, extracurricular activities. Ashley Grimes is our specialist for health education and helps support all of athletics as well. And then there's one administrative assistant who works in the office as well. And so if we can't get answers, we'll direct you to them later on in the program to answer some of those questions. So with that, I think we have some questions, and you can keep those coming for the next 45 minutes or so. And I'm going to pass it to Mrs. Dahl, who will organize those questions and ask away.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Hendrick, for that overview and the information about stakeholder feedback is how it's being used to guide our district. We will now move on to the question and answer portion of the evening. There will be 45 minutes for this portion of the agenda. We are going to try to get through as many questions as possible at this time. If you need an additional index card or have written your questions already, just raise your hand and the staff members will come by and collect them. I will read the questions aloud and then give the superintendent and board members an opportunity to respond. The board and superintendent are committed to a standard of civility and decorum in conducting our community meetings. This includes refraining from clapping or making audible noises during or after the speaker or staff members' comments. We appreciate you in assisting us in maintaining a civil and constructive environment. It is everyone's responsibility to ensure decorum, respect, and civility for all present. Lastly, please note that this meeting and all comments will be replayed on the Pinellas County's YouTube channel, and the video will be publicly archived. Members of the public may always communicate with the board or superintendent through their email addresses at board@pcsb.org or at super@pcsb.org. Now we will start with the questions. So question 1, what are the requirements to make a current club to be considered as a sport, such as cheerleading? How do you determine how many coaching stipends are given per sport?
Sure. So we have a guiding document called the Blue Book because originally, probably 50 years ago, they put a blue cover on it, so it's stuck as the Blue Book. But it outlines sort of our policies and procedures for athletics. So in there is how do you start a new sport? Essentially, there's a form that you fill out. You give it to Mr. Allison at his office, and then annually at the meeting of the Pinellas County Athletic Conference, which is simply the principals of all 16 sport-playing high schools, as well as the athletics directors at those schools, they will vote on the proposals to update and change the Blue Book. And so some of those Blue Book proposals from time to time have been things like, we want to add a championship for JV football, which we just held last week. And years ago, we didn't have one. We just played the season and it ended, and that was it. We now have a championship because it was added to the Blue Book. So a sport would be an addition in the Blue Book, and you would just fill that out. Typically, there's a rationale that can go in there. Sometimes they may ask you to come and make a presentation about it. I would say that the two that are closest on our radar, one was mentioned is cheerleading, the other is boys volleyball. And we've heard a little bit about those in the past, and I would suggest that they'll probably come up for votes again soon. In the cheerleading space, I think that's an area, like I referenced earlier, that we would certainly benefit from people who live in that world in competitive cheerleading. It's very different than cheering for the basketball team on a Tuesday night, and it can be costly. It can also generate revenue for the district if done well. And so if you have an interest in that, leave your name and phone number there, and we'll have staff reach out to you.
Okay, any thoughts on
Let me get to the second one. I'm sorry. On the coaching supplements, those are looked at on a financial basis as well as number of players on a team and sport. So typically there's roster limits on different sports, and that kind of determines if there's paid assistant coaches. Again, that is something that through the Blue Book, if somebody felt strongly that should be added, that we would look at that. I would also say, just a reminder, that there's not an unending pot of money to do this. So if we added that somewhere, we'd have to subtract somewhere else in the budget. And so currently, the sort of balance there is what we have.
Anyone else? Okay. Any thoughts on decentralizing budgets and having individual high schools pay for everything? I believe Hillsborough County does this.
So there are districts that decentralize, and we've talked about it in the past. The challenge is we are a very dense county, obviously. And so unlike rural counties where there's long-standing traditional, everyone in the neighborhood goes to these schools, that has not necessarily been the long-term case because of our choice in busing and all other kinds of things. Are there some schools that could do very well in that regard? There are. There are also some sports and programs that could not do well in that regard. And so to be fair to all of our student athletes, that's the tactic we've taken. However, I will say that although it is still called centralized, there are a lot of things that have been decentralized in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, coaches didn't make their schedules at all. They were all made at the district office. You received an email and you found out the same as everybody else when you were playing, who you were playing, if you're at home or away or anything like that. That's not the case anymore. Coaches are deeply involved in making their schedules, home, away, who they play, when, how, all those things. I think the idea of schools owning it on their own is possible, but I think the other side of that is it would require a full-time position at the school As many of you know right now, we have assistant principals for athletics who also do 1,000 other things at the school. None of that is really full-time, and in districts that have that, they have full-time positions. I would say Hillsborough is not decentralized. They are definitely centralized with some parts that are decentralized, like Pinellas.
What initiatives does the county have regarding safety in high-contact sports?
Board members?
I think I would just like to say, I think the superintendent's going to answer a lot of these questions. I'm not sure the school board has delved deeply into athletics at this level, so thank you, Mr. Hendrick. If you
And
would
we're all
continue.
lifelong learners, so it's a good learning.
But I will say the board was very interested in us having a topic on this for this reason. In terms of safety, certainly we take the lead first from the state of Florida and the laws that are passed. And so I can tell you in the last decade there have been a lot of changes in requirements for safety in athletics, from lighting and just field use outside to heat, the wet bulbs that everybody has to have outside, cooling tubs that we have to have for outdoor activities. All of those types of things have all really come in the last decade. In terms of high contact sports, it's educating coaches and trainers being present during those practices and events that are the best things. So we've done a lot in terms of coach education. All coaches have to take concussion training and protocols every single year, but particularly in football, soccer, lacrosse, where contact is much more frequent, wrestling as well. Those coaches have additional training. Like a lot of things, whether it's in a classroom or on a field, it is always, in some ways, dependent on the coach following through on those things, and certainly the schools monitoring that. When we hear about those things, it's immediate action. Certainly Mr. Allison and the principals, you heard from Ms. Patterson, would immediately address those things at the school level. In terms of like football, padding, and things like that, as the state has allowed more of those things and suggested changes in helmets or suggested changes in types of pads, we have responded with those needs. Some of those things evolve, and what is great 1 year or 2 years after more testing sometimes isn't, and those things change. But it is always top of mind for our coaches, and something that if anybody has suggestions on, we certainly will welcome and entertain.
Did you mention about heat?
I did mention heat, yeah, for sure. That's probably the biggest one. We have to have heat bulbs out on fields that measure the relative, I'm not an expert in the science behind it, but relative humidity versus the temperature, and if students are safe, and there's really clear temperatures on that. And we must have cooling tubs at practices, and any time the heat is an issue.
Why do boys' basketball games have 3 referees while most girls' games only have 2?
Referee assignments are set by the officials, so we have no control over that. Sometimes they do it for training purposes. They'll put 2 good ones with one that they feel is not as good to learn from. Sometimes they do it because of availability. Occasionally they'll do it if they think it's a big game, so to speak. But I can tell you the coaches, athletic directors have no control over that. They are as surprised as you are with who's walking in the gym that night and how many. They're just happy they're there.
Regarding sports facilities, Eastlake High School has a swimming program and team, but they don't have a pool. My son was on the swimming team, but not anymore for that reason. Will there ever be a pool built there? They do have space for it.
Good question. So most high schools do not have a pool. We have pools at Northeast High, at Seminole High, at Clearwater High. Palm Harbors is a joint with Palm Harbor Y, but technically the Y operates that pool. And I'm missing one more. But nonetheless, pools are expensive. So are we going to build more pools? Not unless we have partners that want to do it with us. And we have reached out to municipalities to see if they want to partner with us on that, where we would build it on our ground, but they would maybe operate it. The community could use it when we're not using it. We had an agreement with one municipality 4 or 5 years ago, and maybe it's more than that now, maybe 8 years ago. Plans ready to go, money allocated. they had an election, the mayor changed, and they decided they didn't want to do it. And so that was the situation there. We do pay for the leases of those pools so that schools are not raising money to lease pools in those situations. Certainly would love to have more, but in the realm of, do you fix air conditioners, do you improve bleachers, all those things, pools are extremely expensive to operate on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why we have partnerships. We do share pools. A lot of times schools will partner with other schools to share multiple high schools using the same pool. But if you have inroads with county commissioners or mayors or YMCAs that want to partner with that is definitely something we've had conversations. And I don't mean like 10 years ago we had those. As recently as about 3 weeks ago, I met with two different groups to talk about the possibility of partnering on pools. So if you have ideas in there, certainly list them and we will be in contact.
Why, as a public school system, does it cost parents a lot, such as boosters, fees, clothing, $250, $300 per child, plus we volunteer, buy food, snacks, and other gear to go with the uniform?
Good question. I would say that that's very, very school dependent and very program dependent. There are schools that parents really are not expected to pay anything when their child participates in a sport. There's either not the ability in that community, or it's not important to that coach to have matching warm-ups and everybody has the same shoes and everybody has 4 different collared shirts and t-shirts. In other programs and coaches, that is something that is just sort of part of the program. Certain sports are more so that way than others. I think our board members who all have children that play high school sports could chime in on that if they wanted. That's really controlled at the school level. I'm looking at Ms. Patterson. Certainly if they feel that is becoming excessive, then they address that. But a lot of that is based on the school itself and not governed at the district level at all. Do you guys want to chime in on your experiences on that? Because I know it's fresh for all of you.
It is. I don't really have experience at the high school level yet. My son's a freshman at St. Pete, and he's playing on the JV fall baseball team, but so very, very little to zero experience for me on that. But in middle school, where I coached the boys volleyball team at John Hopkins Middle School for 3 years, and then plus my son played every sport, so I was giving boys rides, to and from basketball games or track and field or flag football. In that community, I definitely saw when it comes to access to shoes, to have a pair of decent shoes to play basketball in or shoes to play flag football. So I saw that need when it just came to access for both equipment, transportation, to get the physical, to even have the opportunity to try out for the sport. So I see that need from that level. And, I dream of a day where we could start like a county-wide booster or charity type organization where that kind of stuff could be needs-based. But I don't have experience at a school where they want you to buy custom warm-ups, and it is a lot more money, so I don't know if somebody else does. But I can tell you that when we went, St. Pete doesn't have its own baseball field. We have to get the kids to the city field to practice baseball. A lot of schools have their own baseball field. Our field doesn't have lights, whereas I think there are maybe 3 or 4 high school fields that don't have lights. So there are, it isn't all exactly equal, and so we pick up the load to try to make sure those kids can have a positive experience.
Yeah, I will speak to this for a moment. I probably have I don't know, you and I both
have the most children.
But I think there is the only sport I haven't delved into is football. At this point, having my kids be in just about everything from basketball, soccer, baseball. I have a competitive gymnast, and we have done a little bit, at least a season or 2 of everything. But at the high school level, we have been involved in soccer, been involved in lacrosse, baseball, and also I led with that I do theater, but theaters run very similarly to the athletics. So I'm going to touch on this a little bit because I do think that the costs are very dependent on your booster club for that particular club sport or particular event. And so I've been involved in in extracurriculars where the Booster Club was really well organized and doing a lot of fundraising, and it drove costs down for parents, and other times when they can't seem to get enough volunteers or struggling to get the Booster Club rolling, the expenses are going up depending on the program. So that is something that, you know, as a board member, I've been talking to people very recently about what it might look like if we created some district programming to at least help with the organizational aspects of this kind of fundraising, because oftentimes it does get put on the shoulders of a really willing and excited parent who then gets very worn out very quickly because it is a lot of work and a lot of time they might not have expected to put into the program for their child. And so, I've been talking to a number of principals over some visits over the last 6 months, and also a number of constituents who feel the same. So it might be something to think about as a district as we move into our district strategic planning this year, to think about some form of organization that we could help with to make that an easier process for school by school, program by program basis, and hopefully drive costs down for parents.
I think that you all touched on pretty much everything. I don't, as a board, we don't want there to ever be any barrier for a student to compete in a sport that lights them up and makes them excited to go to school every day. So I think that suggestions are welcome. I think we've heard some good ones tonight. I welcome more. But again, I think it's something that as costs rise for everyone, just for basic necessities, that understanding as a district that all of these extras impede our kids from being able to participate in the way that they want to. So I think it's a good discussion to have about how we can sort of see those needs, meet them in a way that, again, doesn't prevent kids from participating in the way that they want to.
Okay, is it allowable for students to drive each other to away games and tournaments, but because we were told there were no buses?
So a couple of things. One of the things we haven't mentioned yet that I should have put in the presentation is the board asked for the purchase of vans to help with transportation on small runs. So think of 12-passenger vans. The vans arrived about a month or so ago, and I think they're going to be out and about once they've been all the safety checks and cataloging and all that. I think, I'm looking at Mr. Allison, but like next month, I think, or shortly thereafter. So that should help with some of those things. Is it allowable? The answer is no, in terms of, do we sanction students driving other students to events? No. If there's a situation where the coach says, we're not going to have a bus tonight, we're going to meet there, then it is up to the parents to determine and how that's going to happen. If you choose to have your child go with another child, that's perfectly fine, and it's probably perfectly safe, just like they drive to school together. But we don't coordinate to say, yes, have this 16-year-old drive the other 16-year-old. We wouldn't condone that. In terms of buses being available, I would say kind of rewind to what I talked about earlier. So there are a certain number of games that we provide transportation for, and if we are committed to providing transportation, we do that. So when a bus isn't available, typically what that means is that that's not a game that the district is paying for, it's an extra game, and thus the school is bearing the cost of that. Can the school order a bus from us? They absolutely can. Can a school order a charter bus? They absolutely can. Obviously, there's costs associated with that. There are some things, though, like golf and tennis and those types of sports that we don't provide buses to, where it is all self-transport. Typically, our coaches help to do that, but that's why we purchase these vans, and we hope that that helps both at the high school level and middle school level moving forward.
I will say the vans took us 6 years and a movement of the Florida legislature to make happen, so we're pretty proud of the vans it took us. It's about a 6-year process trying to get those available, so I think it's safe to mention how much work went into achieving that.
We had to get the legislature to change first into doing that, but we had a question from a board member. How are they getting distributed? The answer is there'll be one at every school coming up soon. So certainly by second semester, there'll be 2 at every school, Mr. Allison said. And then it's just a matter of
I mean, that's a really big deal. I mean, I mentioned John Hopkins Middle School basketball team. I mean, kids don't have rides. They don't have rides to get to these games, and they don't have rides back. And so I would try to get another mom with a minivan who could get there at 4 o'clock, which is not easy for everyone to be able to do. And you try to figure it out as a community, right? We show up and we try to figure it out. So to get these vans is a really big deal. I'm an advocate for all levels, but I think in middle school, the more we can give access to the athletics, plus train coaches and have really good coaches that aren't just skilled in the sport, but skilled leaders and mentors. Middle school is a place where we lose kids, and athletics is a place where we can really grab them. And like Ms. Blacksburg said really well, it gets them excited to come to school every day. So I'm very excited about those vans.
There's some training with it, but any coach can drive the vans. It does not require a CDL, just a regular driver's license. We're setting up some procedures now, so stay tuned, but I believe it's going to be any district employee.
The district says they want middle school to learn more about fundamentals. Why can't they play more games? The students learn more from games. You can only practice so much. They need real game time presence.
So I think this is in relation to the number of games that we have in middle schools. Part of that is the availability of officials, to be honest with you. And if you've been involved in sports like volleyball or basketball, you typically see somebody do a middle school game and then go right to a high school game. And there's a cap with really how many games we can get scheduled in that regard. Part of it is athletic facility availability in terms of getting people around with travel and things like that. And then the other side of it is you see the seasons in middle school. They really are start and stops, where in high school, you're not typically asking the same people to coach all year. It's kind of the PE teacher normally coaches like 4 of those sports, whereas in high school, that's not the case. The football coach is not coaching basketball, and the season doesn't need to end for the basketball season to start. But if it's something you feel strongly about, that there should be more, definitely encourage that feedback. And I've been taking a list of some of these things, but I really, really hope that the things that are most important to you, you list on these posters tonight.
Middle school sports only have 2 to 3 weeks to prepare for the season. That's not enough time for cross country and track.
So that's the opposite to the first question we had, right? There's not enough practice time. There's not enough games, for sure. And our goal, you know, I was going to ask this on an earlier question, but raise your hand if your kids played club or travel in any sport. All right, probably most of the parents in here. So, you know, middle school sports, we're not pretending that our basketball competes with travel basketball, or we're not pretending that it competes with club volleyball. We're trying to provide a good experience for students to get exposure, to have a good time on teams, but we don't think that these are as competitive as that. And so that's why you see a shorter portion of that. For some people, that's a turnoff. They don't like coming out. This isn't as intense as my volleyball that I've been doing since I was 4. And that's okay. But for the most part, people enjoy it because it's with their classmates, it's interscholastic, and it's fun. So I think the answer to that is we think we're in that sweet spot of 4 seasons and sort of what availability we have. But again, if people have other suggestions, we'd love to hear them tonight. Certainly lengthening those seasons causes challenges for multi-sport athletes and coaches who are normally coaching a lot of the sports.
It's a middle school night. Why does middle school not have proper equipment to prepare athletes? Example, tracks, hurdles, high jump, proper long jump.
So middle schools typically participate at high schools when they do their meets, and all of that is available there. But a lot of times their practice is at the middle school where, no, we don't have a long jump pit and things like that. So it's a cost expense. You know, how many long jump pits can you have in a district? Right now we have, 17 or 18 at our high schools. Middle schools are certainly welcome to go there and practice and do that and train that way. Again, you have to get there. Where's your middle school versus the high school? In some cases, it's really easy where the middle school and high school are located literally next to each other. In other cases, it's a little more difficult. But that's a cost factor. In terms of hurdles and things like that, we do have those available. High schools typically give them to middle schools. It's a matter of the middle school maintaining them and making sure they don't get lost and left outside over the summer and things like that.
I think I want to ask a question. How could a parent or a coach advocate for, so if they don't have the hurdles or if they don't, what is their chain to advocate for that equipment?
Sure, they can talk to the athletic director at the middle school, or they can advocate on behalf of towards their local high school. High school track coaches or basketball or whoever it is would love to hear from parents in the middle school who say, hey, we want to get better, because that's a feeder program to them. And so any of those connections, if your middle school assistant principal for athletics doesn't make the connection or you're frustrated with the turnaround, you can reach out directly to that high school coach and say, I want to help, I want to be part of a solution, I can feed you, more better trained athletes coming forward. And I can tell you those coaches will always welcome that, including probably welcoming them to come practice with the high school on certain occasions.
So I'm going to combine a couple of questions. Parents want to know who can drive students to the games, as far as coaches or other parents.
So it's treated just like a field trip. Again, if we're arranging it, it's treated like a field trip. So any parent who's level 2 cleared, who fills out a form and says, I'll take people, can do it kind of once a season and can do that. Again, coaches and schools don't own we don't want to own that, you go with him, you go with him, you go with him, you go with him, because then we're responsible for that. And we haven't vetted those drivers, we don't know, all those types of things. So if we're arranging it, any level 2 volunteer, or certainly any school board employee can do so. Do need to fill out the paperwork once a season to do that. On the reverse side, parents can choose, stand in front of the coach and say, okay, we'll work together and we'll get each other there, and that's perfectly fine. And again, in youth leagues and other places, that happens all the time.
Can you give some info on boys volleyball, like funding, teachings, and things that would be good to know? There's a girls volleyball team, but we don't have a boys volleyball team.
I'm going to let the college volleyball player first speak to the merits of boys volleyball, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the backstory.
I guess that's me. I played Division I volleyball. It's an awesome sport, and I want my son to play. And he played in high school, and like I said, middle school. I coached the middle school team, and it was a lot of fun. But there's no boys volleyball in high school, and I think that stinks. And as far as the merits of it, if I were to make the case, to me, volleyball is a fast-paced, high-speed, high intellect. You have to move and work with your teammates. It's no contact. It's extremely, strong, fast, physical. It is a great, fun, powerful sport, and I think we should have it for boys. So I do hope it comes up again in the Blue Book process.
In terms of costs and things like that, obviously we have gyms, we have nets, ball, all that. It would require stipends, so adding coaches to that. Boys volleyball is a spring sport, if I'm correct, right? So it's a different season in terms of the gym. The bigger issue historically in Pinellas has been Title IX. So we have to balance participation between females and males in our sports and show how we're making that possible. That's why you see in some sports JV girls teams, but not JV boys teams. Examples of that are soccer. There's JV girls, but there's not JV boys. And it's because girls don't participate at the same level as boys in the different sports we have. A lot of that's blamed on football and large rosters in football, or what used to be really large rosters. So the reason it was not brought into the district for many years was we were behind and not in compliance with Title IX, and so adding more boys sports went against our sort of obligation to try to increase participation in girls sports. I would say that, if it was something that would be considered, we'd probably need to add a girls sport with that. I think the obvious one to that is cheerleading. And then it's a matter of the continuation of trying to make sure you can fund those things and also cover those things. I will tell you, our principals and high school assistant principals, even as we've declined in terms of the number of assistant principals, some of our high schools now only have 3 assistant principals, not 4. They cover all those things. And sometimes when you say, hey, great news, we're going to add 12 more volleyball games and 15 cheerleading nights to your schedule, it is a challenge sometimes for them to manage all that. You heard Ms. Patterson say there's 3 events here tonight, and I don't know that one of them's a game. But probably tomorrow night there'll be 2 games, and the next night there'll be 4 events. And so there is a little bit of just threshold of how much is too much at one place. But I do think there are things that could certainly happen, and People who want to advocate for that can do so, not only tonight, but at school board meetings and other places. And typically, when the voices are loud enough, people add them.
Okay. How is the board taking measures to adapt to neurodivergent or IDP students to meet both the competitive nature of sports while simultaneously upholding inclusiveness and fairness to the students?
That was a board question, so I'll leave that to you guys. I'm teasing. Our high school sports are competitive. They're not recreational sports. They're not equal playing time sports. They are strictly based on merit. And so there are tryouts. People are cut. Not everybody makes the team. And when you do make the team, not everybody plays. And as a standard backdrop for that, we don't leave students' disabilities or accommodations or other things, off the table to say, well, that's just not applies here. Certainly, there are student athletes. There was a really public news story lately about a swimmer at Gibbs High School and the neurodiversity and paraplegic things that she's overcome. And so there are opportunities for students to participate regardless of what the disability or accommodations that may need to, and I don't say disability in a negative way, but whatever accommodations might be. Typically those things are worked out school by school, sport by sport. I've seen great examples of that. And I've seen times when, individual coaches are just like, I don't have time for it. And that's on us to make sure that people have time for it. So long as the individual would normally make the team, right? I mean, you have to make the team first, including accessing those accommodations at the start of that. So if you have specific questions on that, I think members of our team could help with that tonight. We have a couple of other members in the front here that might be able to assist if you have a specific question related to a sport or an individual.
Has the county considered partnering with colleges and universities to cover team expenses, uniform, shoes, etc.?
Yes and no. In some cases, universities, certainly ones nearby us, like an Eckerd College, for example, struggle themselves to make their budget meet. The University of South Florida, yes, has done some things. Certainly the Buccaneers, the Rays, we've worked with those organizations and they've sponsored different things. But in terms of like buying all the uniforms and that, we've not had success in that regard yet. We have had conversations with them. The Rays, for example, sponsored all the PCAC championship t-shirts that any team that won a PCAC championship received a shirt this year. Is something that we try to do to make those championships more valuable. And the Rays sponsored those shirts. The Buccaneers have sponsored some things. The Rowdies have done some things. Sometimes sports specific, but never to the point where they've been willing to say, hey, we're gonna do it for all your sports over a sustained basis. But we will continue to try.
And we are also very open to that. Happy to accept.
Okay, I'm going to group a couple. Just how can people go about making a club into a sport? Like, so if you have a club, for example, like cheerleading, how do you make it a sport at a school, or beach volleyball, something of that nature?
Yeah, again, the first step would be to reach out to your school principal and athletic director, share that interest. There's a process, a form to be filled out, a blue book proposal. That then goes to, as I mentioned earlier, the Pinellas County Athletic Conference and the members of that team, which are the principal and the athletic director at each school. So there's 32 people on that. And then that is presented there. I can tell you, I remember when I was a principal, beach volleyball was presented and really clear how that was run and all of that. So there are opportunities for people to do that. That's how bowling got added. That's how lacrosse got added. Again, the best proposals come with solutions for startup costs and even training of coaches. Lacrosse was a big one. Lacrosse is not a native sport to Pinellas County, so we can offer lacrosse, but who's going to coach it? I mean, who's the expert in that? Volleyball, obviously, you're going to have a little more in terms of expertise. But there's also a density thing. Can we find 16 people to do that? And you saw for a little while schools combine sports, a couple schools on one team, things like that. That's done now with like club hockey teams that are organized. So it's the process starts with your principal athletic director, and then through the blue book, there's a form to fill out. Again, Mr. Allison's here, can help you share that process with you. But also I would include, probably a fourth time I'll say it, how do you get that kind of groundswell started so that it's not like, hey, district, go do it? Because if we had the expertise or thought it was already, we would have already done that. So we'll probably need the help of people who are doing these things successfully already.
Is there any thought to lowering the grade requirements to participate in sports?
So at the high school level, no. That is a state law or state FHSAA rule, so we don't control that. That has changed over time. So the value of the GPA and when it's calculated has changed over the years, but I think it's been set on 2.0 and a semester for 15 or more years probably. But that would be through the Florida High School Athletic Association policy and the committee there where that changes. We don't have representation on that. That's actually been changed a lot in the last couple of years. Gubernatorial appointees now, much more political in terms of the appointees. It used to be members were elected by schools and athletic directors would elect athletic directors and principals would elect principals, but that's really changed. So it would have to go through the Florida High School Athletic Association.
Why are track and fields locked tight and unavailable for public use? It would be a great conditioning opportunity.
Yeah, it's a good question. So any use of school facility requires some level of oversight in our board policy and in the law, especially now with school safety and the way that we are there. So there are some tracks that are actually available to the public, but they're done through leases with municipalities. So the city of St. Petersburg says, we'll rent the track, or the city of Safety Harbor will rent that middle school track. We don't charge a big fee. We just want somebody to go unlock it, lock it, make sure there's not strange things left on the track so that when we show up the next morning, we're not having to clean up the community's items that day. I think an interesting parallel to that is youth football. So we lease youth football, our stadiums, to some youth football organizations, and if you've ever been involved in that, that's a full Saturday and there's all kinds of stuff in the parking lot afterwards, and we expect them to clean that up. We're not going to come in on Monday morning and clean up the weekend's McDonald's and beer bottles and everything else that's been left out over the weekend. And so if the community, whoever's leasing that from us, doesn't do their part, then that ends the lease. But it's mostly an insurance liability and safety for that, but we will work with municipalities who want to open it up. Safety Harbor did it for years from like 6 to 9, Monday through Friday.
There are a few questions on GoFan. Why are we using it if we're losing $1 for each ticket, and how is it being disseminated among schools?
I think I wrote that question because I've been frustrated with GoFan, like many of you probably, for years, that why are we giving away $1 in every one of these things? So we do have to use GoFan, the ticketing app, for state series competitions. So anything districts or beyond, because the state gets a portion of that revenue, and then there's a whole formula of how it gets redistributed. The $1 fee that goes to GoFan, we just lose. And so I've argued with our technology team for a couple of years, why can't we make our own app to do that? And so we actually have that app in development. I saw it the other day, and I would suspect by next year we'll probably be doing our own ticketing. It's called Pre-Pass, and we can use it for anything regular season, and then that won't be an issue. But the state makes us use it for that. We have looked at other apps. I don't know that GoFan is any worse than any other, so it's the one we've been using. But looking forward to making our own and not paying $1 fee on every ticket.
What can be done by the district to remove the subjective criteria from sports tryouts? Coaches soliciting players at clubs, registration requirements, asking clubs, leagues, and our students to play in, and a coach bias.
That's a hard one because a lot of our coaches coach in the community, and that's what makes their program strong. So they know who's coming to their schools, they know who played last year, all of those things. Where there are opportunities, I know cheerleading is probably the most prevalent in this case. People have had independent judges come in and actually score cheerleading tryouts and then go from there. But I think at the end of the day, coaches have to be comfortable with their student athletes. And as a longtime coach and principal, the times that I start dictating to coaches who needs to be on their team or how much they have to play will be the end of having coaches. They really need that autonomy to do that on their own. Now, if it's clearly problematic and things like that, we've all dealt with one-offs like that as principals or athletic directors where, clearly there's a bias or something's gone wrong or there was miscommunication or whatever, and we deal with those individually. But by and large, it is up to the coach. In terms of rubrics or things like that, that's really difficult to get into. Just because you're fast doesn't mean you're a better basketball player. Just because you're tall doesn't mean you're better. There's a lot of reasons that coaches have certain people on the team, including the 14th and 15th player who are never going to play in a varsity basketball game. The reason they're chosen might be different than some other reason, right? It may be they're younger and they have a chance to develop over the next couple of years. It may be that team chemistry-wise, the coach just feels that person makes more sense for that. So I would say that, we're probably not going to move in that direction, but I will say that there's training every year for our coaches in that. There are definite times where we've had to step in unique situations, but in terms of creating like a district-wide platform, probably not going to see that.
Mr. Hendrick, can I ask a follow-up to that question? I did have a constituent ask me this the other day, so while we're on the subject of athletics, this had to do with tryouts for sports teams and how the district makes sure that it is a fair and equitable availability to all students. Since the tryouts and scheduling is often done coach per coach, how do we ensure that all the students who might be interested in that sport know when and where those tryouts are available?
Yeah. So the seasons are set by the FHSAA. So tryouts are set, sort of the tryout dates are set by the calendar. So for example, the basketball season is coming up. I happened to ask one of the girls basketball coaches the other day, and I think it's November 2nd. It's the first day of the girls basketball season. And so tryouts can not be before November 2nd. The obvious question is, what about that whole preseason thing that they were running? And what about the summer program they were running? All those things. I mean, you have a better program when you have that year-round ability, and everyone should have access to that at some point. Those announcements are made at the school level, and typically athletic directors try to manage that to make sure that things are done fairly. Typically you see multiple dual sport athletes where that becomes a problem, or people who just move in, or even the fact that they didn't participate because of other reasons in that. And again, we have to try to look at those things individually, but they're definitely managed on a calendar and then sport by sport advertised at the school. And there shouldn't be conflicts between tryouts for the same season. I mean, that's just poor scheduling at the school level.
Okay, I'm going to group the last questions together as a last final question. But athletic programs at schools, if you have 1,500 students, how many students are actually getting into the programs? And then they are needing this for college. So they're needing, when they go to the colleges, they are saying that their participation in sports is very critical to them, getting into their colleges. So how are we preparing them from JV up to go to college and include as many students as possible?
So in an earlier slide, we had the number of possibilities in high school, and I think it was 10,500. So divide that by 16. So I just did the math, 656 spots per school every year. Obviously, not every spot on every team is filled. There are times when schools don't even field a JV team because there's not interest, or the golf team only has 4 players or 5 players when they could have 12 or 15. So how do we generate that interest and how do we cultivate that? That's part of our middle school programming, is to really expose them to the different sports so that they get interested in that. At the high school level, a lot of that relies on the coaches to recruit student athletes in and then develop them through the process to go to college. We certainly have a lot of college participation in Pinellas County. You see that every year, signing ceremonies, all of that. We do some training for coaches every year on the NCAA eligibility process, and we train counselors on that to make sure that students are academically prepared so that they don't get to a spot where they're being offered a position or even a walk-on opportunity, but yet they didn't take the right sciences or they didn't take enough math. So we're pretty straightforward and clear in the academic counseling side. The athletic development side is really sports specific and even sometimes coach specific at a school where, Palm Harbor University's soccer team, for example, is dozens and dozens every year go to college. And even I remember talking to Mrs. Patterson last year, I think it was, that she said the 3 best players at this school didn't play on the high school soccer team. And you had a state runner-up or Final Four team because they're so competitive in the club and they're playing on the national team and things like that. So there's that sort of varying levels. We're never going to be, making people on a U.S. national team and pretending that our sports are the ones doing that at the high school level based on a 6 weeks calendar or 3-month calendar. So we try to advantage students in that process and allow them, when they are uber talented, to do that. When I was a high school principal, I had a state champion tennis player who ended up winning the NCAA championship and is still playing Australian Open, French Open, all those things. And I remember meeting with her mom, and she said, listen, her priority is youth tennis and competing at the state level. And I said, great, I support that. I want that at my school. My only ask is that she plays in the minimum number of tennis matches just so she can play in the state championship. And because I wanted that generate the interest at the school level. I had an Olympic swimmer, same thing. She didn't swim. She didn't practice with our high school team. She practiced with her Olympic swim coach, and then came to our meets. So coaches know how to do that. Certain sports like swimming and golf lend itself to that. Basketball and football don't. You can't just not show up to football practice and then show up on Friday night. So different ways, but we do really try to foster that, again, like so many answers, individual coach by coach basis.
Okay, so thank you to everyone for those questions and engagement in the evening. Remember, on your way out, there are posters around the room that you can add additional comments or feedback to on PCS athletics. Our staff have pens and sticky notes for you. I want to thank Mr. Hendrick and the board for being here. We hope to see you at our next Listen and Learn, and you can find that schedule at pcsb.org/listen and learn. The board and Mr. Hendrick will be here to answer individual questions for you as well.
And if I may, real quick, Ms. Steen, we really do want your feedback, so please don't leave with at least one sticky note. It'll make us tackle you out the door. And also the QR codes for our district strategic plan. You can scan it and do it on your way to the car. I mentioned Mr. Allison and Mrs. Grimes are here as well, so we're here, happy to answer questions throughout the rest of the night. Thank you so much.